Hello and welcome to the IDTANA Storytellers. The IDTANA Archival Committee has been tasked with capturing the stories of some of our most influential members over the years. Our committee's goal is to gather these stories to benefit our organization's teachers, families, and dancers, and to preserve North American Irish dance history for generations to come, honoring those who came before us and ensuring their names are not lost for those who come after us.
Hello, I'm Yzanne Noone, and today I am in Oakville, Toronto with Paula Woodgate, who's going to impart her history, knowledge and thoughts on Irish dance. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with us. And let's get started at the very beginning. Where are your parents from and where were you born yourself?
My father was from Ballyhay, Cork, just outside Charleville, and my mother was from in between Buttevin and Doneraile in Cork as well.
Very good. And were you born in Ireland or were you?
I was born in Ireland.
Oh, very good.
I was born in Cork too.
Oh, and how long were you in Ireland before you moved to Canada?
About 5 years.
Wow.
And then came out.
You're like my own kids are the same.
Exactly.
And then so you came to Toronto originally, or did you come to another part of Canada?
No, we actually came in. We sailed to New York, went through Ellis Island, and then we came up by train in through Fort Erie and arrived in Toronto. Excellent. And we're just amazed.
Right, so then you settled into life here in Canada, and then what was the Irish family like here at the time when you moved here? Can you remember that?
The family life was, everybody was very busy. In those days, women didn't work, and my mother went out and got a job. She was a nurse. And, a lot of people frowned on the mothers staying home to work or staying home to look after the children rather. And, but it was a necessity. And it was very hard adapting at the beginning because it was so strange and we had nobody here. We had no relations, no friends, nothing. So we depended on our schools and our church, and that's how we survived. We didn't know any other Irish people here when we arrived, which was sad. Okay,
so then how did you manage to get into Irish dancing class, or how did you figure that part out?
Well, initially my mother signed me up for tap dancing, jazz and baton twirling and figure skating. She was one of those stage mothers and she was proud of her little girl. I had two brothers. I had one brother, Liam, or William as we called him, 5 years older than me, and then I had another brother 2 years younger. And but they were into sports and I was into performance.
Excellent.
And but she couldn't find anything Irish dancing anywhere. And then initially, what happened? I used to go around and do little concerts at school and for the parish, and I was out performing one night down at St. Michael's Choir School. The Irish were running a St. Patrick's Day dance, and I was doing tap dancing and I was twirling my baton, right? And after the performance, Father Corrigan came over to me, and he was newly arrived with the Holy Ghost Fathers who founded Neil McNeil High School out in Scarborough. And he went over to my mother and he said, "In the name of God, what have you got her doing this kind of dancing for? Why don't you put her in Irish dancing?" My mother said she looked everywhere and she couldn't find anyone teaching Irish dancing. So he says, "I know a lady that's, she goes around and she's teaching in some of the houses, but she's out at the West End." He says, I can't remember her name, but he said, "I'll get the phone number for you." And then he did, and he forwarded it, and we contacted her. And she was teaching in someone's basement, and she had just secured a space in St. Basil's Hall on Bay Street in Toronto. So I went out for my first lesson there, and I just loved it.
And who was she? Who was that teacher?
Well, she was the very famous May Butler.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
She walked into the hall on her tippy toes, and she never went down flat the whole time, the whole lesson. She was amazing, and it was just so lovely and refreshing to hear, the Irish patter again.
Absolutely, an amazing way of finding each other too.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, such a small world.
So we were very blessed, and then the rest was history. And in those days, really, you went to Irish dancing just to keep your heritage alive. That was really the main purpose, to keep everybody aware of, who they were and where they came from, and never to forget your roots. So, we were a very small group, the Irish, at the time. And then my mother said to me, why don't you try and get some feshes organized? Because there was no feshes around. So they persevered, and for the first couple of years, May just ran little concerts. And what she would do, her husband Paddy was a famous musician from Ireland, and he had his own band in Dublin, a big orchestra. And so when he came out here, he had a regular full-time job working for the TTC. And then on weekends, he would go around playing at weddings. But he was really into fitness. So I remember every year at the recital, he'd do this drill, and we'd all have to wear our white shorts and our white T-shirts. And he had a whistle, and we'd do flag drills. And it was really, really great. And it broke up the monotony of Irish dance after Irish dance after. It was something, we used to... we would giggle because we couldn't wait for the young Pat Butler to come out in his shorts. And he was a character. All the Butlers were characters.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing history, to be involved in right there. It's really amazing. And tell me, how often would you go to dance class?
Oh, in those days you just went once a week.
Once a week. And then you'd have to travel a long time to get there, or...
Oh, did you?
Or how did you used to travel?
Two streetcars and a bus.
2 streetcars and a bus,
Yeah.
and then you get there, and your shoes under your arm.
And then eventually, her classes got very big, and she was in big demand. But Irish dancing was only sought after around St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
So it was very limited, and we spent most of our time going cheering up the elderly or the shut-ins, or going to the hospitals to entertain. And it was lovely, and we didn't care. We were getting to see one another. We built up all these friendships that have last a lifetime.
And then what was class like itself when you were in class? Did you do a lot of solo dancing, or did you do teams or group dances, or a mixture of everything?
It was a mixture. May was very strict. She liked all the traditional dances, so we did all the set dances, and she liked the figure dancing, and she was very creative, as was Paddy Butler, Paddy Senior. He was very creative with a lot of the figure choreographies, so he did that.
Excellent
And
mixture.
it was a bit of everything.
So then, when you mentioned there about the Feshna, when the Feshna did come along, how did you feel about starting off into the Fesh world, and what was that world like that time?
Well, she said that we had to get out and experience a Fesh, and we had to have competition. Sure, there was no competition in Toronto because she was the only school, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was in touch with some of her friends down in New York and New Jersey. And so she encouraged us to go down to one of the Feshes, which occurred in, can't even remember whether it was Iona College. Can't remember. So we went to New York, and by the car, everybody was piled into the cars, and we had a great time. But our eyes were open because up on the stage there was dancers wearing hats and kilts, and we'd never seen a hat on with a kilt, right? So that was interesting, but they were just overwhelmed with our performances. We won everything when we went down, and they could see the difference in their style and our style.
And also in the costumes, what did you wear for your costume leaving here? What did you use?
At that time, her dress was, her school costume was a white dress with a full skirt, full circular skirt, and the green box jacket.
Lovely.
And we had the gold rope around the waist.
Right.
Very traditional. And then she was sought after to go down and do workshops, so she would go to Cleveland and Detroit and different places, and try and teach them some of the new things that she had brought over from Ireland. And so that was our circuit. Our cities that we would go to were Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, New York, and Boston. And that was it for the entire year.
Right. Wow. So What competitive milestones or achievements did you have yourself during your career?
Well, I won many championships, and actually when we went away, we never knew what the venue was going to be like. You know, some of the festivals, all the festivals were outdoors in those days. There was no such thing as an indoor fest. So you just had to take the weather as it arrived. And I remember being in Chicago in Gaelic Park, and they had stages set up all around the field, and it was just gorgeous. And then when we went to Cleveland, we used to dance at, it was a German facility, and we were starving. And then when we went up to get our lunch, and it was hot dogs with sauerkraut on it, and nobody had ever tasted it, so it was, so it was fun. And you know, it was the friendship you made, and I think that was the best part, is meeting friends, and renewing old acquaintances as well.
Of course, and that's one of the main things about Irish dance always in my lifetime. It's the same, that it's that camaraderie, and that you don't see people from one end of the year to the other, but you pick up the same as if it was yesterday. Yeah, right. Which is a common understanding for sure. Then what trends have you seen over the years, say since your day, that have gone, and then new trends that have come? Is there any that you'd replace or that you bring back?
Well, we always like to go away to keep pace with style. And I think that was really prevalent when we could see the different regions, what they were unique and their dancing reflected whoever taught them. And if they were taught by a teacher from Belfast, they used to say, oh, they have the northern style or the Derry style, that you could tell if the teacher was from Dublin or from Galway or from Cork. It was just there, you know. Yeah. So the trends, I think, were the costumes changes. Slowly the embroidered dresses came in, so everybody was in a rush to get the embroidered transfers sent over from Arnott's in Dublin, and the mothers would iron onto the costume, and then they'd spend days, weeks, in some cases a year, trying to embroider the dresses. But they were lovely, and they were a proud thing, and every dress contained a symbol of Irish culture, because the designs were taken from the Book of Kells.
Yes.
Which that in itself was an education for all of the dancers who perhaps never had been to Ireland. So they were getting their history, a lesson on the purpose of the symbols that on the dresses that they wore. And then eventually it became very competitive, and people kind of strayed away very slowly from the traditional Celtic designs, and then they would put on a round tower on the front of their dress, or the Lakes of Killarney, or a huge Tara brooch. Nowadays, children don't even know the meaning of a Tara brooch or the symbols, of the history that goes with it.
Yes, for sure. That little part is definitely.
And then the other thing that I think changed a lot over the years, the costumes have evolved tremendously. I think the colors went from basic traditional colors to psychedelic, fluorescent, you name it. And it's just like you and I, Yzanne, the fashion changes, and you have to keep pace with the fashion,
Sure.
And I think that's when we started traveling overseas, abroad. One of the main purposes was to keep pace with the latest style of steps and the new innovations that are going on. Shoes changed, the soft shoes changed, but the biggest change was when I still call them the hornpipes. The kids laugh in class, they don't know what I'm talking about. And I'll say, your heavy shoes. Some say hard shoes, but anyhow. And but the shoes then, to make the noise, as you know, we're not allowed to wear taps. So it was the nails going in on the bottom of the soles. And then we buy our shoes direct from Dublin, because Matt Milady had this amazing shoemaker in Dublin, and we'd fly over to competitions, and you get off the plane and you raced downtown Dublin to Arnott's to get your transfers for your costume. Then you'd run to the cobbler, then you'd go buy your shoes and then you had to go back to the cobbler, and you'd have to put more nails in, because that's what the style was. You you couldn't even lift your leg. They were so heavy.
Yes,
They were
different
really
sound and different support system for sure.
And then, of course, that trend changed too. And after about, I think it took 20 years, thank God, because the nails on the bottom of the shoes were damaging all the wooden floors in the halls that the teachers taught in, whether it be at a school hall or a parish hall, which was quite common. And people were being told, teachers were being told, I'm sorry you can't come back if you're going to continue to perform and dance in those shoes, though they're damaging our floors and it's too expensive. So somebody developed the fiberglass, and then the rest is history.
Yes, for sure.
So, and then like the black shoes, the real shoes, they were called different things by, I guess, we just said the real shoes. That's what we said. Some said brogues.
We call them pomps.
Pomps. We call them pomps too.
Yeah.
And funny enough, that was another trend on the pomps. The mothers would make a round tassel. Did you ever have that?
No, I didn't have tassels.
Tassels that were on the front, just to stand out and be. That was an Irish trend. That was big. And then on the light shoes, the laces, instead of crisscross, went up the leg to the knee. And then the socks were long knee socks. And that trend eventually changed to the poodle socks, right?
Yes.
The white socks, and the laces came down because everybody realized when you're dancing, your calf muscles moving constantly and the laces were constantly coming undone. So
that's amazing, all the changes that have happened over the time. In all of that time being here in North America, have you felt ever at a disadvantage or an advantage compared with people over in Ireland and England?
I think when we started going over to the World Championships or the All-Ireland, we got a great awakening, because definitely I think carriage was so poorly done in North America. Nobody paid attention to swinging arms or good posture or keeping your arms still. And we stood out a lot. It was a huge difference. And we saw how great the posture. I think we were lucky in Canada because Mrs. Butler always insisted, carriage is one of the key forms that must be maintained in your dancing for balance and everything else. But that was the, and the new things that would come in, your cuts used to be done below your knee. All of a sudden, the thing was to get your cut up to your hip.
Yes.
And then the next thing, you never raised your straight leg on a click above, just above your knee. You never did. Gradually got higher and higher and higher. And then I remember seeing a young gentleman down in the States in New York, and he was from Boston, and his name was Liam Harney. And the next thing, he came out and he did his reel, and his click was up over his head, and we never saw anything like that. Well, then that just went all over North America. Everybody's clicks were going.
That was the new style.
Yeah. And the clicking sound for the boys. And then that was another big trend to, was the treble reel or the double reel, whatever you want to call it. Instead of the boys doing it in a soft shoe, all of a sudden they were bringing rhythm in, which was interesting because you're going back to the basics, because originally Irish dancing was only done by men.
Yes.
So that evolution was really interesting to witness.
For sure. So what age were you, Paula, when you finished competing and decided to move on to the next level and go teaching?
I was about 21. And in those days, that's when everybody hung up their shoes. And I just loved Irish dancing. I loved it with all my heart and soul. Yes. So I decided to open up a dancing school, and I started, and Mrs. Butler didn't take well to other people teaching, because that was her thing. And it was very hard to encourage people. Toronto has always been very limited as far as the Irish. We've always been a small, close-knit community. And anyhow, I got married and we moved to Bramalea. So I opened up my first dancing school. I moved out to the suburbs and there was nobody teaching, so I opened up my little class. And fortunately for me, the new community that was being built, it was a suburban city,
and there was all new immigrants, and they were all from Ireland or Scotland or England. So it was lovely, and there was nothing to do because there was no entertainment in the area. And with all the new immigrants, they were anxious to put their kids in dancing. So I really got very, very lucky. Well, my class costume was black, and how that came about is when I decided to go into competitions with the children. There were very few feshes in those days, right? And so I started looking for designs first I went for designs and then colors, and I chose black and green, and I had a second color was a green and a purple. So I started looking for the designs to put on the costume. I had something in my mind, and I wrote to Ireland, to the convent in the local town where I'm from, Doneraile, and Buttevant, right? And the sister sent me out a whole bunch of the iron-on transfers, and I was just taken by them. And I picked my design, which was a serpent's design, and then the colors I was just, and I thought, the sisters were so good. That was the message. So I stuck with the black, and then emerald green was my second color. So I stuck with it, black, white, and green, and created my costumes. And I had that for about 20 years. Oh, I think each and every dancer that steps into the class stands out, And when you look at your photographs that you keep in an album, you look at one photograph, and it's true what they say, you get 1,000 memories back. And people that you haven't thought of, all of a sudden that image on the photograph wakes up those memories. And so getting back to your question, my very first two dancers were fabulous dancers, and was Eileen Scott, and she was a lovely wee redhead with curly hair, and her parents were Scottish from Donegal heritage. And my other dancer was Marie Foley, was beautiful, lovely little girl, and her parents were both from Leitrim. And so they're my first two. And then after that, I had a beautiful champion, Joanne Grassens. But I had so many. I was very fortunate. I was blessed with great parents and great dancers. And I think that's the network. You pass it on from genes, from generation to generation. We were able to qualify to travel overseas to Ireland, mm-hmm. right? And what happened the first few years we were allowed to compete in Ireland, we were always listed in the program as Americans, right?
Yeah.
And if an American won, it would be it was strange, and we didn't want to be called American. We were very competitive with America.
Yeah.
They were our friends, they were our family, but we wanted also to acknowledge our own identity. Canada is a separate country,
right?
And so the first couple of years it didn't look good being an American. And anybody you stopped in Ireland would say, "Oh, whereabouts in America are you from?" And we'd say, "Well, we're Canadians, we're from Canada." And so it kind of grew over the years from traveling. And then we requested our own identity and our own qualifications, right? So we decided we didn't have our separate organization. Mm-hmm. So May Butler got us together, and all the teachers that were teaching at the time had a meeting. And it was about maybe 12 of us, and had meetings. We organized. We set up the very first Canadian fesh. We called it a fesh. It wasn't the Oireachtas at the beginning, but qualifications, right? Mm-hmm. And we selected the date and everything. And we were organized for about 2 years, and then it came up to the qualifying for going to the Worlds, which was always held in New York. Mm-hmm. And Mrs. Butler decided, if she was going to travel, she wanted her dancers to have strong competition, and she didn't feel confident enough with the development of the other schools in Canada. Mm-hmm. She didn't think we were strong enough for her dancers to be strong when she went to Ireland, right? Mm-hmm. So at the last minute, she pulled out, and she went back to the competitions in New York, right? Mm-hmm. And so we were left. And we had to make the choice, will we, you know, still go ahead and have our own competition for qualification, or, you know, will we follow suit? Well, we didn't. There were 2 other teachers that went with Mrs. Butler back to the States, right? And but anyhow, the rest of us persevered, and we held our very first qualification, and it was fabulous. And we grew, and we have a huge membership now. We have 110 teachers in Eastern Canada.
Exactly. And you said you got married and you had children. How did you manage to balance all of those facets of life, of being a wife and a mother and dancing teacher? And did you have a job as well, or no?
I did. I did. Yes, I worked at the airport. I was in public relations.
Yes.
And I had a fabulous job and great benefits and a free parking spot and free gas for petrol for my car. Right.
Right. Yeah.
It was lovely, and I loved my job, and but it was demanding because my hours demanded me to stay around when the VIPs were coming into the airport. So the hockey teams, or the theater groups, or the movie stars, or you know, actually the Queen came one year, you know, so you had to be available. And but fortunately I married Michael Woodgate, and he loved the dancing as much as I did, and he also was a musician. Perfect. So he was always playing at the feshes, and so it was lovely, and that helped me in a great way, because when the kids came along, then, you know, a lot of times people that are in a marriage, if they don't like Irish dancing, it really puts a lot of strain on everyone.
Great team.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Paula, what advice would you have for new teachers who are new qualified and starting their new classes?
I would tell them, relax, take your time, and remember, Rome wasn't built in a day. Neither was Dublin or Galway or Cork or Kilkenny, for that matter. But enjoy it. Enjoy it. As you go, every day we all learn. And look at me here, like after 5 decades, I'm still teaching, and I learn something new every day. But enjoy the ride. It's a privilege to be teaching children and sharing your culture with them. And be very patient and have fun, and never get angry. That's the worst thing you can do. You'll get more out of a dancer if you stay happy, stay up, and they'll practice.
And Paula, what would your hopes be for Irish dance moving forward?
I think, you know, we've been really at the eclipse of a beautiful period of time, and I hope it never changes. I think earlier we talked about Irish dancing. We have that secondary family there, the network. It's beautiful, and it should always remain the same. Competition is there for all of us to enjoy, and we're just pacing one another towards perfection. That's all we're doing. It's not who wins or loses. It's that we've performed. We came, we saw, and we conquered.
Okay, Paula. Thanks so much, Paula, for all of your time today and this amazing interview, and all of your knowledge and thoughts that you've handed on to us.
Well, thank you. And it's lovely to meet you, Yzanne, all the way from Galway originally, and now you're in and you're making your own strides here. But and you left that beautiful Galway Bay, and now you're down here in the bay down in Oakville. Thank you for bringing the Canadian journey to everyone.
Thank you.
You're welcome.